What if the Bible isn't what people claim it is, or written centuries after the events they describe? If that's true, then millions of people across history have built their lives on something unreliable. But what if the opposite is true? What if the Bible is actually one of the most carefully preserved documents in human history? That question bothered me enough that I decided to investigate it myself. Hi, my name is Michael, and this journey started with a conversation I wasn't expecting. One afternoon, I was sitting with my friend Marcus when he asked me something simple, something I realized I didn't actually have an answer for.
So you really believe the Bible?
Yeah, I grew up with it.
But do you actually think what you're reading today is the same thing people wrote 2,000 years ago?
I paused, not because I disagreed, but because I had never seriously thought about the question. I honestly don't know.
Because a lot of historians say ancient texts change over time. Copies get edited, stories grow. So how do you know the Bible didn't? I honestly don't know.
That question stuck with me. So instead of arguing about it, I decided to investigate it. My search began where historians usually start, ancient manuscripts. When historians study the past, they rarely have original documents. Instead, they rely on copies, manuscripts written by scribes generations after the original authors lived. At first, I assumed the Bible probably survived in only a handful of copies, but the numbers surprised me. The New Testament alone exists in more than 5,800 Greek manuscripts. When translations into Latin and other ancient languages are included, the number rises to over 24,000 manuscripts. That sounded impressive, but I still wondered something. Was that actually unusual? Or was that normal for ancient history? So I started comparing those numbers to other famous historical writings. Later that day, I met Marcus again. Marcus, I think I found something interesting.
Already? What?
The New Testament has more than 5,800 Greek manuscripts. And when you include other languages, there are over 24,000 copies.
Wait, 24,000? That seems like a lot, but does that actually prove anything?
That was a fair question, so I kept digging. And what I discovered next made the comparison clearer. Take Julius Caesar. His book about the Gallic Wars is one of the most important sources historians use for Roman history. But historians only have about 10 surviving manuscripts of it. And the earliest copy we have was written nearly 1,000 years after Caesar lived.
Wait, historians trust that?
Yes, and then there's Alexander the Great. Most of what we know about his life comes from historians who wrote hundreds of years after he died. The original writings are gone.
So our information about Alexander comes from much later writers?
Exactly. And then there's Homer's Iliad, one of the most famous works of ancient literature. It has around 1,800 surviving manuscripts. For ancient texts, that's actually considered very good.
Okay, that's a lot more than Caesar.
It is. But when you compare it to the New Testament's 24,000 manuscripts, the difference is huge. That comparison changed something for me. Because if historians trust documents with only a handful of surviving copies, then the Bible's manuscript evidence is actually extraordinary. But the most fascinating discovery in the story of the Bible happened in a desert, and it happened by accident. In 1947, a shepherd boy threw a stone into a cave. Instead of silence, he heard the sound of breaking pottery. Inside the cave were clay jars, and inside those jars were scrolls, thousands of years old. Today we call them the Dead Sea Scrolls. Later I mentioned it to Marcus.
I've heard of those. How old were they?
More than 2,000 years old. Some of them contained copies of books from the Hebrew Bible.
So what happened when scholars compared them to modern Bibles?
That's the surprising part. Across more than 1,000 years of copying, the texts were almost identical. For historians, that discovery was remarkable. It meant that despite centuries of wars, migrations, and political upheaval, The biblical text had been preserved with extraordinary care. But manuscripts weren't the only clues. History also leaves evidence buried underground. Archaeologists have spent decades digging in places mentioned in the Bible. Slowly, ancient cities began to appear. Stone walls, city gates, royal inscriptions, coins. Names of kings once dismissed as legends suddenly appeared carved into stone. One day, Marcus asked the obvious question.
So, are you saying archaeology actually supports the Bible?
Sometimes it does. Archaeologists have uncovered cities, rulers, and events mentioned in the text. History keeps intersecting with the story. That realization mattered to me, because it meant the Bible wasn't just a spiritual book. It was deeply connected to real history, real places, real rulers, real events. When I began this investigation, I expected to find the evidence falling apart. But instead, I found something else. A collection of ancient writings, preserved across centuries, copied by generations, carried through wars, exile, and empires. And somehow, it survived. Later, Marcus asked me one final question.
So, after everything you've looked at, what do you think?
Honestly, I expected the evidence to weaken the Bible. So maybe the real question isn't simply, can we trust the Bible? Maybe the deeper question is this: if history preserved it, what will we do with what it says? History preserved it. Now it's our turn to read it.